Mama Ifeoma's buka was more than just a place to eat. It was a sanctuary for those craving home-cooked meals. The small, lively space in Lagos bustled with traders, bankers, and market women who all swore by the flavours in her food. Customers returned daily, some travelling long distances just to get a taste of her signature dishes. But behind the success of Mama Ifeoma's kitchen, an unseen force was at work. Though she prided herself on her culinary skills, she could not ignore the whispers that sometimes floated in the kitchen, the pots that stirred themselves when her back was turned, or the way the food always turned out perfect, even when she swore she had forgotten an ingredient. Something or someone was guiding her. One evening, long after the last customer had left, Mama Ifeoma stood alone in the dimly lit kitchen. The aroma of smoked fish and freshly ground peppers still lingered in the air. She sighed, wiping sweat from her brow when suddenly the wooden spoon resting on the counter moved. On its own. She gasped, stepping back. Her heart pounded as she looked around, expecting to see someone. But the kitchen was empty. A cold breeze brushed against her skin, making the flames on the stove flicker. And then a voice, soft yet firm, whispered, "More salt." Mama Ifeoma's knees nearly gave way. Who is there?" she stammered, but there was no answer, only the distant clang of a pot shifting ever so slightly on the counter. The next morning, Mama Ifeoma could not shake the feeling that someone or something was in her kitchen. As she prepared the first pot of soup for the day, she found herself hesitating before adding salt. "More salt," the voice had said the night before. Tentatively, she sprinkled a little extra and stirred. When she tasted the broth, her eyes widened. It was perfect, better than it had ever been. She set the spoon down, her hands trembling. "This is madness," she muttered to herself, but deep in her heart she knew something was guiding her, and she needed to find out what. Later that evening she approached Baba Kemi, the oldest trader in the market, and whispered, "Do you know anything about this place before I took it over?" The old man's face darkened. "Ah, Ifeoma," he sighed. "This kitchen once belonged to Madame Duke, the greatest cook this market has ever known. But she died mysteriously. Right there, in that kitchen." He pointed toward the cooking station. "Some say she never left." Mama Ifeoma's breath hitched. "She never left?" Baba Kemi nodded. "They say her spirit lingers, ensuring that no bad food ever leaves that kitchen." Mama Ifeoma swallowed hard. She had always believed in spirits, but was it possible that Madame Duke was still here, guiding her hand? That night, determined to uncover the truth, Mama Ifeoma stayed behind in the kitchen long after her staff had left. The air was thick with the smell of stockfish and spices, but there was something else too. A presence, unseen but undeniable. She stood by the fire watching a pot of stew bubble. "Madame Duke," she whispered, "are you here?" At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the flames flickered, casting strange shadows on the wall. A wooden spoon lifted off the counter and stirred the stew. Mama Ifeoma's heart pounded, but she did not run. Instead, she stepped closer. "What do you want?" she asked. A whisper curled through the room. "Keep cooking," it said. "Keep the kitchen alive." Mama Ifeoma exhaled shakily. She had been afraid of ghosts her whole life, but this was different. This spirit did not wish her harm. It wanted to help. And for the first time, she wondered if she was truly ready to embrace the magic that made her food special. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions for Mama Ifeoma. The knowledge that Madame Duke's spirit was still present in her kitchen weighed heavily on her. She wanted to believe she was simply a good cook, that her skills alone had brought her success. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Every evening she stayed behind, listening, observing. Madame Duke never revealed herself fully, but her presence was undeniable. The air would shift, the fire would crackle in response to her thoughts. And the food? The food always tasted perfect. Chuka, her most loyal worker, began to notice her distraction. "Mama, you've been acting strange lately. Are you all right?" he asked one evening as they cleaned up. Mama Ifeoma hesitated. Should she tell him? Could she trust him? Finally, she sighed. "Chuka, do you believe in spirits?" Chuka blinked, then chuckled nervously. "In Lagos, anything is possible." "Why?" She took a deep breath. "Because I think Madame Duke is still here, and she's helping me cook." Chuka's laughter died instantly. He stared at her, then at the kitchen. "Madame Duke, the one who—" Mama Ifeoma nodded. "Yes, and I don't know what to do about it." Chuka swallowed hard. "Then, Mama, you must decide if you will embrace her gift or find a way to let her go." Mama Ifeoma looked around the kitchen, at the flames flickering gently on the stove. Madame Duke's presence was everywhere, and she wasn't sure she was ready to say goodbye. Mama Ifeoma spent nights pondering Chuka's words. Could she truly let go of Madame Duke? Would her food still hold the same magic without the ghost's influence? Every dish she prepared seemed to whisper back at her, as though the spirit still lingered, waiting for her answer. One night she stayed later than usual, cleaning the pots herself, trying to connect with the presence she had come to rely on. "Why do you stay?" she whispered into the air. The flames on the stove flickered, casting long shadows. A gentle voice responded, "Because this kitchen is my home." Tears stung Mama Ifeoma's eyes. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. "But don't you want to rest?" she asked. The voice hesitated. "Not yet. Not until my work is finished." Mama Ifeoma understood in that moment. Madame Duke wasn't just lingering out of habit. She had unfinished business. And now it was Mama Ifeoma's burden to help her. Determined to learn more about Madame Duke's past, Mama Ifeoma sought out Baba Kemi once more. She found him seated beneath an old mango tree, watching the market life unfold before him. "Baba, tell me about Madame Duke," she urged, taking a seat beside him. The old man sighed. "Ah, Ifeoma, you have awakened a story many chose to forget." He leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Madame Duke was not just a cook. She was a healer. Her food carried power beyond taste. It brought comfort, healing, and, some say, even luck. But she made an enemy of the wrong people. Some said she knew things she shouldn't, that she could see beyond what was normal. Then, one night, she was found collapsed in her kitchen. No signs of illness, no wounds, just gone." Chills ran down Mama Ifeoma's spine. "And her kitchen," she whispered. Baba Kemi gave her a knowing look. "No one dared touch it, until you." Mama Ifeoma left the conversation with a sense of urgency. Madame Duke wasn't just a spirit, she had been someone powerful, someone with secrets, and now those secrets were tangled in her own fate. Mama Ifeoma's mind raced as she walked back to her buka. The weight of Baba Kemi's words pressed heavily on her. If Madame Duke was a healer, had she been betrayed, murdered? And if she was, what unfinished business kept her spirit bound to the kitchen? That evening, as she stirred a pot of banga soup, she noticed the flames flickering erratically. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. She turned swiftly, her heart hammering, but nothing was there. Yet the room felt charged, as though someone or something was trying to communicate with her. A sudden gust of wind blew through the kitchen, rattling the pots. Mama Ifeoma gripped the counter, her breath shallow. "Madame Duke," she whispered. The wind stilled, the fire calmed, and a single word drifted through the room. "Beware." Chuka, entering just then, stopped in his tracks. "Mama, did you hear that?" he asked, his voice shaky. Mama Ifeoma met his wide eyes. "Yes, and I think it's time we find out what really happened to Madame Duke." Determined to dig deeper, Mama Ifeoma spent the next day searching every inch of the buka. And if Madame Duke had left any clues, they had to be here. She pulled out old sacks of rice, lifted the wooden shelves, and searched behind dusty pots. Then, hidden behind a loose brick near the stove, she found it. A worn, leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink slightly faded. She flipped through the fragile pages, her fingers trembling. June 14th. I feel eyes on me. I do not know who I can trust anymore. July 2nd. They say I meddle in things I should not, but I only wish to help. If anything happens to me, let it be known, I did not fall by my own hand. Mama Ifeoma's blood ran cold. She knew, she whispered. She knew she was in danger. Chuka leaned over her shoulder. Mama, we need to show this to Baba Kemi. If Madame Duke was killed, we have to find out by who. Mama Ifeoma nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone else already knew what she had just discovered, and they would not be pleased. That night, Mama Ifeoma barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the journal's words burned into her mind. I did not fall by my own hand. The weight of those words was unbearable. Someone had wanted Madame Duke gone, and she needed to find out who. The next morning, she and Chuka made their way to Baba Kemi's stall. The old man was setting up his goods, but the moment he saw them, his face darkened. You found something, didn't you? He asked quietly. Mama Ifeoma handed him the journal. Baba Kemi's hands trembled as he turned the pages. She knew she was being watched, he muttered. And she was right. There were people who did not want her to continue her work, people who feared what she knew. Who? Chuka asked urgently. Baba Kemi hesitated. The ones who deal in the dark arts. They see her knowledge as a threat. He looked directly at Mama Ifeoma. And now, they will see you as one too. A chill ran down Mama Ifeoma's spine. She had unknowingly stepped into a world more dangerous than she had ever imagined. As Mama Ifeoma and Chuka walked back to the buka, she felt it again, the sensation of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, catching a glimpse of a man in a dark agbada standing at the far end of the market. His gaze locked onto her. The moment their eyes met, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Her pulse quickened. Did you see that man? She asked Chuka. Chuka frowned. Which man? He scanned the bustling market, but saw nothing unusual. Mama Ifeoma shook her head, unsure if her mind was playing tricks on her. But as they entered the buka, a folded note was waiting on the counter. It hadn't been there when they left. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The message was simple yet chilling. Stop digging or you will regret it. Chuka swore under his breath. Mama, we need to be careful. Someone doesn't want you finding out the truth. Mama Ifeoma exhaled shakily, her resolve hardening. Then we must be close to it. That evening, the buka was quieter than usual. Even the regulars who came for dinner seemed more subdued, their voices hushed as if sensing the tension in the air. Mama Ifeoma's mind was clouded with worry. Who had left that note? And what exactly were they warning her about? After closing up, she sat by the fire, staring at the glowing embers. Chuka, noticing her troubled expression, sat beside her. Mama, we can walk away from this, he said softly. We can ignore it and just keep cooking. Mama Ifeoma shook her head. No, Chuka, if Madame Duke was killed for what she knew, then we owe it to her to uncover the truth. Just as she spoke, the wind picked up, rattling the pots. Then came a faint whisper. Beware the ones in the shadows. Chuka leapt to his feet. Did you hear that? Mama Ifeoma nodded, her face pale. Madame Duke's spirit was trying to warn them. But about what? The next day, a stranger entered the buka. He was tall and dressed in flowing white robes, his face partially hidden beneath a hat. He ordered a plate of afada rice and ayamasi stew, but before he could take a bite, he leaned in and whispered to Mama Ifeoma. Not all ghosts seek justice, some seek revenge. She froze, her hands tightening around the tray. Who are you? She asked. The man smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Someone who has seen what happens when the past is disturbed. Then, without another word, he stood and left, his plate untouched. Chuka rushed to her side. Mama, what did he say? Mama Ifeoma's hands trembled. That we might not be dealing with just one spirit. As the door swung shut behind the mysterious man, the room seemed darker than before. Something was coming, and Mama Ifeoma wasn't sure she was ready for it. That night, long after the last customer had left, Mama Ifeoma locked the doors of the buka and stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The silence felt heavy, thick with something unseen. The words of the stranger echoed in her mind. Not all ghosts seek justice. Some seek revenge. She reached for the journal she had found, flipping through its aged pages. Madame Duke had known something that made her dangerous, but was she the only presence here? Or was there another spirit, one with more sinister intentions? As she pondered, a soft creak echoed from the far end of the kitchen. The wooden floor groaned as if someone was stepping forward. Mama Ifeoma spun around, her pulse pounding, but there was nothing there. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. The only response was a whisper of wind through the firewood stack. But Mama Ifeoma knew. She was being watched. The following morning, as the sun rose over Lagos, Mama Ifeoma decided she needed answers. She could not continue to run her buka while wondering if she was truly alone. She made her way to Baba Kemi's stall once more, clutching the journal tightly. The old man looked up as she approached, his eyes narrowing. "You have seen it now, haven't you?" he asked without preamble. Mama Ifeoma nodded. "There is more than one spirit in that kitchen, Baba. I can feel it. Someone or something is watching me." Baba Kemi sighed and motioned for her to sit. Madame Duke was not the only one who died in that kitchen, Ifeoma. There was another. A man. He was a rival, a jealous one, who thought she was hiding a secret from him. Mama Ifeoma's fingers tightened around the journal. "And what happened to him?" Baba Kemi's voice dropped to a whisper. "He disappeared. Some say he was cursed, others say Madame Duke knew how to fight back." He leaned closer. "But if his spirit lingers, it is not for justice. It is for vengeance." A cold shiver ran down Mama Ifeoma's spine. If there was another spirit in her kitchen, it was not there to help. And she had just unknowingly provoked it. Mama Ifeoma felt an unease settle deep within her chest. That night she moved cautiously around the buka, her ears straining for any sound out of place. She could no longer deny it. There was another presence in her kitchen, and it did not carry the warmth of Madame Duke. As she stirred a pot of agouti soup, the flames beneath it flickered violently before dying out completely. The room plunged into an eerie silence. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon outside. A shadow loomed on the far side of the kitchen, just beyond the reach of the dim light. Mama Ifeoma's breath hitched. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The air turned cold, and then a deep, guttural voice rasped, "You do not belong here." A gust of wind swept through the kitchen, sending pots clattering to the floor. Mama Ifeoma stumbled back, her hands gripping the counter for support. The temperature dropped further, and she felt an invisible force pressing against her chest. The presence was not just watching her anymore, it was warning her. The next morning, Mama Ifeoma wasted no time. She rushed back to Baba Kemi's stall, desperation tightening her throat. "Baba, I need more answers," she pleaded. The old man studied her face and nodded gravely. "You have felt it, haven't you? The darkness?" She nodded, recounting what had happened the night before. Baba Kemi sighed and reached beneath his stall, pulling out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. This belonged to Madame Duke. She had prepared for a time like this. It is protection, but it will only work if you are strong enough to wield it. Mama Ifeoma unwrapped the bundle, revealing a small calabash filled with dried herbs and a string of cowrie shells. She recognized them as spiritual tools but had never used them before. "What do I do?" she asked. You must reinforce the kitchen. The spirits that linger are bound to that place. One seeks to guide you, the other seeks to destroy what was once hers. You must decide, will you fight to keep Madame Duke's legacy, or will you let fear push you away? Mama Ifeoma swallowed hard. She had no choice. She had come too far to walk away now. As the last embers of the ritual fire dimmed, a knock sounded at the door of the buka. It was well past midnight, and no one should have been there. Mama Ifeoma hesitated before moving to the door. She peered outside and saw an old woman draped in a tattered shawl. Her eyes, though aged, held an intense fire. "You called for help," the woman said. "I have come." Mama Ifeoma stepped aside, allowing the stranger in. She had a feeling this woman was no ordinary visitor. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. The woman settled onto a stool, glancing around the kitchen with knowing eyes. "I am Mama Ekundeo. I knew Madame Duque long before she passed, and I know what haunts this place." Mama Ifeoma's breath caught. "You knew her? Then tell me, why does the darkness linger?" Mama Ekundeo sighed, her face lined with sorrow. "Because justice was never served. Madame Duque was wronged, and until her name is cleared, she will never rest. But neither will the one who cursed her." Mama Ifeoma's pulse quickened. "Who cursed her?" The old woman leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man with power. A man who feared what she knew. And if you do not tread carefully, he will come for you too." Mama Ifeoma felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought she was fighting a spirit, but now she realized her greatest enemy might still be alive. Mama Ifeoma barely slept that night. Mama Ekundeo's words echoed in her mind, a man with power. If Madame Duke had been betrayed, then the enemy was not just a restless spirit, but someone who still walked among them. The next morning she met Chukar in the kitchen. "We have to find out who Madame Duke's enemies were," she said firmly. "If she was cursed, there must be someone who benefited from it." Chukar nodded. "We should start with the old records. Maybe Baba Kemi or some of the elders in the market know something." They spent the day asking questions, but few were willing to speak. It was as if the past had been locked away, buried beneath years of silence and fear. Finally, an old woman selling roasted plantains hesitated when Mama Ifeoma mentioned Madame Aduke. "She was a good woman," the woman murmured, "but she had a secret, a powerful one. She knew something about the people who controlled this market, and she paid the price for it." Mama Ifeoma's hands clenched. Who was behind it? The old woman glanced around nervously. "Go to the abandoned building near the edge of the market. The answers you seek are there." That evening, as the market emptied, Mama Ifeoma and Chukar made their way to the abandoned building. It had once been a storage space for traders, but now it stood silent and crumbling, its walls covered in creeping vines. "Are you sure about this?" Chukar whispered. "This place has been closed for years." Mama Ifeoma took a deep breath. "We have to know the truth." They pushed the rusted door open. The inside was dark, the air thick with dust and neglect. As they moved deeper, their footsteps echoed. In the center of the room, a single wooden chest sat untouched. Mama Ifeoma's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside lay old, faded documents and a blackened notebook. The name Madame Duke was written on the first page. She flipped through it, her heart pounding. The notes detailed transactions, names of powerful figures in the market, men who had controlled trade through intimidation and corruption. And at the bottom of one page, a sentence stood out. "They will silence me before I can reveal the truth." Chukar exhaled sharply. She was murdered because of this. Mama Ifeoma clutched the book to her chest. "We need to show this to Baba Kemi. If we expose this, we can finally give Madame Duke the justice she deserves." But as they turned to leave, a low creak echoed through the building. A shadow moved at the entrance. Someone had been watching them. Mama Ifeoma and Chuka froze, their breaths held as the shadow at the entrance loomed closer. The dim light from the street outside barely illuminated the figure. A low, deliberate voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Mama Ifeoma tightened her grip on the blackened notebook. "Who are you?" she demanded, forcing her voice to remain steady. The man stepped forward just enough for his face to be partially visible. He was older, his face lined with age and wisdom, but his eyes held something darker secrets buried in the past. "Madame Duke was warned," the man said, ignoring her question. "She didn't listen. Don't make the same mistake." Chuka instinctively stepped between them. She was killed for knowing the truth. And now, we know it too. The man exhaled sharply. Knowing something and proving it are two different things. He took another step forward, and Mama Ifeoma could see a scar running down his cheek. "Leave this alone. If you value your life, walk away." For a brief moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with a final glance at the chest of documents, the man turned and disappeared into the night. Mama Ifeoma's hands trembled. "We have to get this book to Baba Kemi before it's too late." As they hurried back to Baba Kemi's stall, the weight of the notebook seemed heavier in Mama Ifeoma's grasp. The man's warning echoed in her mind. "If you value your life, walk away." But she couldn't. This was bigger than her now. It was about justice. For Madame Duke. For the people who had suffered under the corruption in the market. Baba Kemi's eyes widened when he saw them. "You found it?" he asked, in a hushed tone, pulling them into the safety of his small hut. Mama Ifeoma placed the notebook on the table. Madame Duke kept records, names, transactions, evidence. They killed her to keep it hidden. Baba Kemi flipped through the pages, his hands steady despite the grim expressions deepening on his face. This is dangerous," he murmured. "If these men realize you have this, they will come for you next." Chuka squared his shoulders. "Then we have to act fast. We expose them before they have the chance." Baba Kemi sighed and looked at Mama Ifeoma. "Are you truly ready for this, Ifeoma? Once we step into this battle, there's no turning back." She met his gaze with unwavering determination. "For Madame Duke, for justice, I will not back down." Baba Kemi nodded. "Then we must prepare, because once this truth is out, the real fight begins." The following morning, Mama Ifeoma, Chuka, and Baba Kemi gathered in the back of the buka, poring over the contents of the notebook. The names recorded were powerful men. Business moguls, politicians, and market leaders. Men who had controlled trade for decades. "This is enough to bring them down," Baba Kemi murmured, flipping through the pages. "But if we go to the authorities, they might be compromised." Chuka clenched his fists. "Then we take it to the press. Someone outside their influence." Mama Ifeoma considered it carefully. "We need to be strategic. If they sense what we're doing before we act, they will try to silence us. Permanently." Baba Kemi sighed. "Then we gather allies. There are still people who want justice." As they planned, the air in the buka suddenly grew heavy. A gust of cold wind swept through, sending shivers down Mama Ifeoma's spine. The shadows near the stove deepened, and a faint whisper filled the air. "You are close, but be careful." Madame Duke's spirit was still watching over them, but her warning sent chills through Mama Ifeoma. If they weren't careful, they could end up like Madame Duke herself. They had barely stepped outside when a familiar face approached them. Chief Olawale, one of the wealthiest traders in Lagos. He was known for his vast influence over market affairs. His smile was too smooth, his eyes too calculating. "Mama Ifeoma Baba Kemi," he greeted, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. "I hear you have stumbled upon some sensitive information." Mama Ifeoma and Chuka exchanged wary glances. "We don't know what you mean, Chief," Baba Kemi replied cautiously. Chief Olawale chuckled. "Oh, but you do. And I am here to offer a solution." a way to keep things quiet and ensure your safety. Mama Ifeoma's jaw tightened. You mean a bribe? His smile didn't falter. Call it what you will. But think of your Bukka, your family, your lives. Do you truly wish to challenge forces greater than you? Chuka stepped forward. If you had nothing to hide, Chief, you wouldn't be so worried about us exposing the truth. Olawale's eyes darkened. Be careful, boy. You don't know what you're stepping into. He adjusted his agbada, then leaned in closer to Mama Ifeoma. Take my advice, madam. Burn that notebook. Forget what you saw, or you might not live to regret it. As he walked away, a pit formed in Mama Ifeoma's stomach. Chief Olawale wasn't making an empty threat. If they weren't careful, their fight for justice could cost them everything. Mama Ifeoma, Chuka and Baba Kemi sat in the dimly lit kitchen, the weight of Chief Olawale's threat pressing down on them. The pages of the notebook lay between them, a damning piece of evidence that could either bring justice or destruction. He's afraid, Chuka muttered, running a hand through his hair. That means we have power. Baba Kemi sighed. Power is a dangerous thing, my boy. He wouldn't have threatened us if he didn't already have plans in place. Mama Ifeoma stared at the flickering flame of the lantern. We cannot let fear rule us. Madam Aduke was silenced, but we won't be. Chuka straightened. Then we go to the press. Baba Kemi shook his head. Not yet. We need proof beyond the book. Something undeniable. He looked at Mama Ifeoma. There must be more records, something hidden in the market. Mama Ifeoma hesitated, then remembered the abandoned storage house at the edge of the market. There is one place we haven't checked. If Madame Aduke knew she was in danger, she might have hidden more than just a journal. That night, under the cover of darkness, Mama Ifeoma and Chuka slipped through the market towards the abandoned storage house. The structure had been unused for years, its doors barely holding together. Chuka produced a crowbar and pried open the rusted lock. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing stacks of old crates, dust, and cobwebs. Mama Ifeoma took a cautious step inside. The air was thick, the scent of old wood and dampness overwhelming. If Madame Aduke hid something, it would be somewhere safe, she whispered. Chuka moved toward a row of overturned baskets and began searching. He had barely shifted a wooden plank when his fingers brushed against something cold. Mama, over here! She rushed to his side as he uncovered a hidden metal box. The lock was rusted, but with a few strikes of the crowbar, it snapped open. Inside were stacks of documents, letters and photographs, evidence of backdoor dealings, bribery and names tied directly to Madame Aduke's death. Mama Ifeoma swallowed hard. This is what we need. Chuka was about to respond when a loud bang came from outside. Their blood ran cold. Someone knew they were here. Mama Ifeoma and Chuka exchanged panicked glances as the bang echoed through the storage house. The darkness seemed to press in on them, thick with danger. Whoever was outside wasn't just passing by. They were looking for them. Chuka quickly shut the metal box and tucked it under his arm. We need to get out of here, he whispered urgently. Footsteps crunched against the gravel outside, slow and deliberate. A shadow passed in front of the broken window. Mama Ifeoma's breath hitched. They're blocking the entrance. Chuka scanned the room, his mind racing. There has to be another way out. He hurried to the back, feeling along the damp walls. His fingers brushed against something, a wooden panel slightly loose. He pushed harder and with a creak the panel shifted. Here, he hissed. Mama Ifeoma wasted no time. She crawled through the small opening first, her heart hammering as she emerged into an alley behind the building. Chuka followed, struggling to squeeze the box through, just as a flashlight beam swept across the storage house. They're inside, search everything, a gruff voice barked. Chuka barely managed to slip out before the door slammed open behind them. They ran without looking back, disappearing into the maze of the market streets. Mama Ifeoma and Chuka didn't stop running until they reached Baba Kemi's small hut. They burst inside, gasping for breath. The old man stood from his seat, alarmed. What happened? Chuka dropped the metal box onto the table. We found more evidence, but they were waiting for us. Someone tipped them off. Baba Kemi's face darkened. Then we must move quickly. If they know you have this, they won't stop until they silence you. Mama Ifeoma wiped the sweat from her forehead. We need to get this to someone who can expose it publicly. The press. Someone outside their control. Baba Kemi nodded. I know a man at the Guardian newspaper. He has uncovered corruption before, but getting to him will be dangerous. A sharp knock at the door sent all three of them into silence. They froze. Another knock, more insistent. Mama Ifeoma, we know you're inside. Come out now, and no one gets hurt. Her blood ran cold. They had found them. Baba Kemi motioned for them to stay silent. He carefully reached for the oil lamp and blew out the flame, plunging the hut into darkness. Mama Ifeoma could hear the pounding of her own heart as the knocking turned into fists hammering against the wooden door. We don't have time, Chuka whispered. They'll break down the door. Mama Ifeoma clutched the box, determination flaring in her chest. There's a back entrance. We go now. Baba Kemi led them to the tiny back door, barely visible beneath stacks of old baskets. He shoved them aside and gestured for Mama Ifeoma to go first. Just as she stepped through, the front door burst open with a crash. Where is she? A voice roared. They sprinted through the narrow alleyways of the market, breathless and desperate. The night was alive with noise. Vendors still packing up, the distant hum of traffic, but behind them, fast and relentless footsteps followed. We have to split up, Baba Kemi called. Ifeoma, take the box to the journalist. Chuka and I will lead them away. Mama Ifeoma hesitated. I can't leave you. Baba Kemi grasped her shoulders. You must. If they catch you, everything is lost. Chuka nodded. Go, Mama. We'll find you later. With a heavy heart, Mama Ifeoma turned and ran toward the newspaper office, gripping the box tightly. Behind her, she heard Baba Kemi shouting, drawing the pursuers away. She wanted to look back, but she forced herself forward. Madame Duke's truth had to be told. As she neared the tall gates of the Guardian, hope flickered inside her. She had made it. She banged on the entrance. Please, I have something important. A security guard eyed her warily before unlocking the gate. Who are you? Mama Ifeoma, she gasped. I have evidence that will expose corruption and murder. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Come in. As she stepped inside, Mama Ifeoma felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She had done it. Madame Duke's voice would finally be heard. End of story.